You are listening to a reading from Cosmic Ships, a book written by Samael Aun Weor, published in the year 2021. This chapter is titled, A Mexican Traveled to Venus.
Here in Mexico City, we know a man who traveled to the planet Venus. We had the high honor of personally visiting and meeting Salvador Villanueva Medina. Salvador is not at all fictional or unbalanced. Salvador has been examined by psychiatrists, and they have reached the conclusion that he is a mentally normal, balanced man. Neither does Salvador make a living from his extraordinary adventure or on the book that he wrote, entitled, I Was on the Planet Venus. One winter night we arrived at the door of his house. We were lucky enough to have been welcomed by him. His family was watching TV, yet in a very amiable manner they turned off the television and left us alone with him in their living room. This gentleman is a mechanic by profession. He fixes cars. This is what he does for a living. We ourselves have been in his body shop, watching him work. He is practical, 100%. We keep the address of this gentleman private, since we do not have authorization to give it to the public. He is a very sincere and kind man. He is not an occultist or a spiritualist or anything of the sort. He does not boast of being a wise person, and in spite of having lived a most extraordinary cosmic adventure, indeed, he is not proud about it. We limit ourselves to two things. First, to give testimony that he is an absolutely prudent man dedicated to his work and his family. Second, that, indeed, this man happened to experience a formidable adventure, but he does not make a living from it. Salvador Villanueva Medina narrated what happened to him, and this has brought him many sufferings because, as always, the loafers, the skeptics, the stupid idiots have made a mockery of him.
Whosoever laughs at what he does not know is an ignoramus who walks on the path of idiocy. Samael Aun Weor.
Beyond any doubt, Salvador was on Venus, and he accomplished his duty of informing this to his fellow men, although they make fun of him. We do not intend in this book to narrate in detail what happened to this man. We only want to talk about it in synthesis, and that is all. In the month of August of the year 1953, this man was on the planet Venus. His name is Salvador Villanueva Medina. Said event happened unexpectedly. On the highway of Laredo in Mexico, he was driving a rental car taking an American couple to the United States. He drove about 484 kilometers when the car broke down. The gringos left the car and went in search of a tow truck to take the car to the nearest town in order to repair it. This is when his adventure began. Salvador went underneath the car to try to repair it. Suddenly, he heard some steps on the sandy roadside, and somebody asked him in perfect Spanish what happened to his car. Salvador kept silent, and when he came out from underneath the car, he found himself before a strangely dressed man whose stature measured about 1 meter and more or less 20 centimeters, about 3.5 feet. The body of this man was of an extraordinary perfection, his skin white like the ermine, and his entire appearance was filled with beauty. What called Salvador's attention more were the unusual uniform and mysterious shining belt, with perforations from which strange lights shone. The man had long hair and wore a very special metallic helmet. The words spoken between them at that moment were few. Salvador limited himself to ask this mysterious personage if he was a pilot. The personage answered that his airplane, as we earthlings name our flying ships, was a short distance away. Thus, after saying these words, the strange personage courteously left, and soon he went towards the mountain. Salvador told us that after this event, he decided to sleep calmly within his car. The most interesting moment happened later, when Salvador was sleeping. Strong knocks on the window of the car surprisingly awakened him. Without thinking too much about it, Salvador opened the door of his car. Then, his surprise became astonishment when he saw the same personage accompanied by another who had the same aspect and the same suit. Salvador invited them to enter his car. Once inside, when stretching his right arm over them with the intention of helping to close the car door, he momentarily felt an electrical current that paralyzed his arm. The conversation inside the car was wonderful. They declared to Salvador that they came from the planet Venus and gave a lot of information about this planet. They said that on Venus, the highways endlessly extend, and with many crossing arterial roads, which are immediately below their highway levels in order to avoid accidents. On Venus, the vehicles do not consume vegetal or mineral fuels because they are detrimental for the organisms. The Venusians use solar energy to power their vehicles. At first, Salvador did not believe them, and even became offended thinking that these gentlemen were making fun of him. Thus, Salvador even said to them that only the planet Earth had inhabitants, and that he had learned this through the affirmations of the wise men from the Earth, etc. They then asked Salvador the following questions. What makes them to think in such a manner? Perhaps the deficient methods they utilize in order to make their calculations? It is not perhaps too much pretension to think that they are the only beings who populate the universe? These questions were already very unusual for Salvador, and in addition, the color of those very white faces, their expressive eyes, their strange voice, their strange helmets, their mysterious belts, etc., made him think very much. To narrate the conversation that Salvador had with those Venusians would be too long. In short, they told him how life was on the planet Venus, how they lived, what they ate, how their cities were, their streets, etc. They also removed from him all doubts by explaining to him that they could turn a detrimental thing into a beneficial thing, and artificially make their climate his atmosphere, etc. So, with those conditions, if Venus were uninhabitable, they could make it inhabitable because their scientific advances allow them to do it. However, it is clear that Venus is perfectly inhabitable. Those Venusians informed Salvador widely about life on Venus. They dissipated his doubts by explaining to him that on Venus, by means of special scientific systems, they created an artificial, benign, and uniform climate, thus turning their world into a delectable dwelling. Dawn was arriving, so in a very amiable manner the Venusians invited Salvador to accompany them to the planet Venus. Thus, Salvador left the car and followed these mysterious men. Certainly after a while, walking among the mountains, Salvador paused before the majestic spaceship. It was a majestic and imposing flattened sphere that leaned upon 3 supports that formed a triangle. Salvador stated that the construction of the ship was impressive and gave the impression of being a great fort. Salvador entered the ship. The doors were closed, and they left for the planet Venus. Everything that Salvador saw in Venus was extraordinary. The Venusian civilization is formidable. On Venus, civilization has arrived at its peak. There, money is not needed. Each citizen works 2 hours daily, and in exchange, one has the right to everything a human being needs for life, namely, transport, food, clothes, vacations, science, etc. Everything belongs to everybody. If one needs a car, one takes it, drives it, and leaves it in its parking lot. If one is hungry, one eats in any hotel and pays nothing for it, because since everybody works, everybody has the right to everything. If one needs to dress, one asks for a suit in a store and does not pay anything for it, because since everybody works, everybody has the right to get dressed, etc. On the planet Venus, cars are powered by solar energy. On their world, they have a single sea, but it is 3 times deeper than ours. Their main nourishment is taken from that sea. So, they take from the sea all the necessary elements to build their buildings, make clothes, vehicles, and 60% or more of their food. Their orchards are upon the roofs of their houses and buildings. They said that their ships can either be in the air or in the water, and that in the deep sea are gigantic factories which are in charge of scientifically selecting and taking advantage of the fish for their nutrition. So, on Venus, fish and fruits constitute their basic food. On Venus, there are no governments, nor mother countries, since the entire planet is their mother country, and only the wise men direct and advise them. I asked Salvador about religious matters, and the answer was that on Venus, religions do not exist, since each citizen behaves on the street as if they were within a temple. Each person on Venus considers that the temple exists within us. The sidewalks of the streets in the cities of Venus are not still because they are made of metallic bands that are in constant movement, thus saving the effort of the pedestrians. The flow of their streets, that is to say, the center of their avenues, has metallic belts that collect the force of the sun with which their cars are propelled. Thus, people never walk on the central flows of their street. So, on Venus, everything belongs to everybody, and the entire Venusian family is a great family. Children are born in special maternity rooms, and they are educated and raised in collective homes. When a child is born, they stamp a mark on his foot. That mark indicates the child's origin and faculties. Thus, according to this mark, the child is educated in the collective home. When the person reaches maturity, he passes to occupy the place in society that corresponds to him. So, on Venus, children are not wandering on the streets. The government manages them until they reach a suitable age to be classified according to their physical and mental qualities and assigned to whatever place they are needed. In these conditions, private families do not exist. Everybody in Venus belongs to a single united family. There is no hunger or war or social classes. There only reigns wisdom and love. For 5 days he lived on the planet Venus and returned to the Earth after having verified the reality of all the affirmations made by the Venusians. The Venusian civilization is 1,000,000 times more advanced than ours. Proud Earthlings. Salvador narrated what he saw. We limit ourselves to comment about it. On that planet, he found 2 French residents, twins and veteran brothers of World War II. They also were transported to Venus, and they begged and cried to the Venusians to not take them back to the Earth. Now they live happily. The Venusians affirmed that some of them are here on our planet Earth, dressed as any citizen in order to study the humanity of our planet. They stated that many thousands of years ago they lived the historical stage that we Earthlings are passing through now. They also knew the wars and the astute political leaders until brotherhood was born. Nowadays, they do not have flags. They have made of their world a single mother country and are governed by wise people who limit themselves to advise them with wisdom and love. Salvador came back to the planet Earth. He was brought back in order for him to inform the inhabitants of the Earth that Venus is inhabited. Phillips Laboratories analyzed the soil and plants in the place where Salvador saw the spaceship, and they found a strange molecular and atomic disorder. The North American scientist George Adamski, who met some Venusians in the desert of Nevada, came in contact with Salvador and gave a lecture about this subject in the Theater Insurgentes of Mexico City. Great German scientists investigated the land where Salvador found the spaceship, and the outcome of their investigations was the same as Phillips. Another great scientist came from the palace of the kings of England in order to investigate the case, and the conclusions were the same as Phillips. So the German Commission of Scientists, interested in this matter, visited Salvador and studied the region of the events. Thus, there are no doubts about it. However, the imbeciles will continue to laugh as always, because they are imbeciles. In these difficult times in which we live, we will be helped by the inhabitants of other planets. It is necessary for us to learn how to telepathically communicate with them. Jesus said, "Ask, and it shall be given you. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you." Matthew 7:7. All of us can visit other planets if we know how to ask. Gnostics must develop telepathy. Gnostics must go to the fields, to the deepest forests, and peacefully and in deep meditation, telepathically enter into communication with Venusians, Mercurians, or Martians, and request to be taken to Venus, Mars, or Mercury. In the peace of the mountains, or in a solitary beach, any day we can have the happiness that Salvador Villanueva Medina had. Each of us can be taken to Venus or to other planets. The system to communicate with those human angels is telepathy. Our universal Christian Gnostic movements have formidable systems in order to develop telepathy. Whosoever wants to visit other planets must not drink alcohol, smoke, or have any vice. Our international Gnostic missionary J.A.B. was visited by an interplanetary spaceship during a retreat in the Summum Supremum Sanctuarium. Yes, the thought waves of the supplicant travel to the planet Venus in a few seconds, and if we are worthy and deserving, we can receive an answer. Thus, any given day, in the solitude of the fields, we can have the happiness of seeing a spaceship landing near us, and then be taken by Mercurians, Martians, etc., since they are true humans, with bodies of flesh and bones, humans with the souls of angels, human angels.